Hello, conference. It's great to be here, and it's fantastic to be at the biggest Scottish Labour Party conference in history. We have more guests, more exhibitors, more members attending than ever before. And of course, more Scottish Labour MPs are attending here too. No longer can the SNP shout "Lonely Murray." And the best news yet, Edinburgh Zoo has sent back the pandas, so those jokes are finished as well. Michael Shanks is an outstanding representative for his constituents, and he will make a huge contribution to the country. Thank you to everyone who helped get Michael elected. But I have two massive downsides. I blame you all for my parliamentary office no longer being my own. And secondly, I blame you all for the £20 I lost to Dame Jackie Baillie on the size of the win. I promise to get it back. Conference, a lot has happened in the last 12 months too. I got married not once, but 3 times. I have to say, all to the same woman, I have to. And it's great to have Mariam here today for our first Labour Party conference. This job is hardest on those that are closest to us, and they shoulder the weight of responsibility. It's their love and support that gets us through the good times and the bad. And I know Anas spoke of his son, Alian, being at his first conference yesterday. Well, my 3.5-year-old daughter, Zola, is here for her first 2. And hopefully it won't be too long until she's delivering some of those leaflets. I asked Zola this morning if she was looking forward to coming to this speech, and she said, and I quote, "Can I watch Paw Patrol on the iPad when you talk to everyone?" So thank you to Zola for her great support. Conference, we gather in Glasgow at a time of political instability in the world. As Anas spoke passionately about yesterday, the conference debated this morning, and many are marching today to highlight this, and marching all over the world as well. The situation in Israel and Palestine is heartbreaking and intolerable. We all want the same thing, for the hostages to be released and for the fighting to stop, and to stop now. And we need that ceasefire to sustain so that it can be a proper process towards a permanent peace with a 2-state solution and recognition for Palestine. The spiral of violence is not new, and it's a huge failure of the international community to find a peaceful resolution. The joint letter from Australia, New Zealand and Canada today echoes the calls from our own Shadow Foreign Secretary for this to stop and for there to be a political process for peace. A future UK Labour government will restore our tattered international reputation and work with the international community to reach an end to the violence once and for all. Conference, you don't have to look far in this city to see why so many people are demanding change. Nothing seems to work. Right now, 1 in 6 people of our fellow Scots are on an NHS waiting list. Compare that to the last Labour government, when waiting times were down to record lows and satisfaction in our NHS was at a record high. I recently spoke to one woman, 83 she is, and she's been told she'll have to wait 3 to 5 years for a hip replacement. Her response, not mine, "I'll be dead by then, son." Last year, 40% of all hip and knee replacements in Scotland were paid for privately. Working people paying to go private because the NHS can't treat them. Now, the Tories might be trying to privatise the NHS by the back door, but the SNP are doing it through the front door. Their new policy, the SNP think that nurses should pay higher taxes while energy giants should pay lower taxes. No wonder the people of Rutherglen and Wellingborough are crying out for change. And what a contrast it is with our changed Labour Party. When Anas became leader, we were languishing on 14% in the polls, fighting to not finish 3rd or 4th. Commentators regularly discussing if the Scottish Labour Party would even survive. Today, our sights are firmly on 1st place. Thank you, Anas, not just for your impressive leadership, but for your friendship too. When Keir Starmer took over the UK party, we had suffered a historic defeat. Today, we're a credible government in waiting, back in the service of working people and the country, putting country before party for the benefit of every part of our country. What a change both Anas and Keir have made, and what a contrast to our shambolic opponents. In Scotland, many of us have long known the Tories for what they are, out of touch and uninterested in the challenges of working people. But even I've been shocked by the lows the Tory party has dropped to. And don't let them get away with disowning the last 14 years. They have failed in everything they've done. Everything is worse. Nothing works. Working people are poorer while having to deal with the highest tax burden in 70 years. This is the highest taxing parliament in history. 14 years of using working people as an experiment for their failed economic dogma. And this week, Rishi's recession. Easy to say before you've had a drink. And it's not just 2 quarters of decline, it's 7. The longest period of economic decline on record. Our economy is now smaller today than when Rishi Sunak entered 10 Downing Street. And guess what? They want 5 more years. The Tories failing Scots is hardly new. But what might surprise more people is the depths to which the SNP have also plunged. The former First Minister, promising bereaved families live on television she would retain all records, while the very same day mass deleting those very records. The current First Minister, protecting a health secretary who took the public and Parliament for fools. And that's not even to talk about the cover-ups, the secrecy, the police investigations. So let us use this moment to reject the politics of division and deliver long-lasting change. Conference, I believe we can deliver. As Anas reminded us just a few times yesterday, electing a Labour government is the change that Scotland needs. Almost exactly 100 years ago, the very first Labour government was formed. It was a period of changing prime ministers, a cost of living crisis, and Russian misinformation. 100 years later, some things never change. But it was also a great period of Scottish Labour history. When you look at the Scottish election map of 1924, it looked a lot like we'll need the map to look in 2024. From coast to coast in the Central Belt, it was a wall of red. The first Labour Prime Minister was a Scot. His Home Secretary, who introduced the landmark housing bill, was the MP for Glasgow Shettleston. And the Labour MP for the Gorbals introduced the first attempt at Scottish devolution. Scots then were at the heart of the Labour government, and they must be again. In Scotland, this is the choice for voters. We can either send a message to Westminster, or we can send a government, and I say we send a government. Because, Conference, despite only being in power for 30 of those 100 years, we've achieved fundamental change for the country together. The last Labour government transformed lives, and the next one will do too. Take a run-of-the-mill Scottish family, their living standards dropping like a stone. The mum who, when Labour was last in power, had secure employment. She's now on a 0-hours contract. Her pay, her take-home pay, at the same level as 2007. How will her life improve with Labour? Well, our New Deal for working people will mark the biggest increase in workers' rights in decades. 0-hours contracts banned. The grotesque practice of fire and rehire outlawed. Sick pay expanded. In-work poverty eliminated. We'll give everyone protections at work from day one for their security. And we'll repeal the anti-trade union legislation introduced by the Tories. These reforms will transform the workplace under a Labour government. And they will transform the lives of millions of people who are currently working harder for less. The statistic that 3/4 of children living in poverty are from a family unit where one or both parents are in work must end. Conference, that's the change Scotland needs. And Conference, is more. A lot of families have sons and daughters rightly concerned about the environment and keen to spend their careers helping to solve the crisis for us. Our Green Prosperity Plan has been in the news recently, just a little bit. But we should not shy away from how bold and ambitious that plan actually is. Let's be honest with people. Since the Tories crashed the economy last year, borrowing has become more expensive. I don't need to tell anyone with a mortgage or paying rent about that. Our economy is in a different state to what it was in 2021, with the Tories inflicting indescribable damage. But despite what Sunak wants you to believe, it remains an enormous package of investment and change in Britain's economy. It means switching on publicly owned GB Energy, headquartered here in Scotland, capitalised with billions to invest in the green industrial revolution. 50,000 green jobs here in Scotland. Huge investment in our port infrastructure to prepare us for the industry of the future. And our objective remains unchanged. Clean, green power by 2030. That's the promise, and that's what we'll deliver. And to help deliver that, a whole generation of Scots, young and old, will play their part. Tens of thousands of families will benefit directly from the boldness of the next Labour government. Until now, Scotland has been let down when it comes to the potential of our clean energy. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Switzerland, where their mountainous landscape has allowed them to generate 50% of their energy from pumped hydrogen. We have the potential to do similar, but politicians here have taken their eye off the ball. Compare our mission for clean energy by 2030 with the SNP's ScotWind licensing round. They undersold the rights to offshore wind sites around the coast. They used the money to plug their budget deficit. Climate change requires bold action. That's what Labour will do. And you've guessed it, that's the change Scotland needs. And something that every family in Scotland will have noticed over the last decade is the lack of economic growth. Household bills taking up an ever-growing percentage of family income, or in some cases all of it. Public services cut because there's not the tax receipts to pay for it. All of the difficulties in our country, which I've talked about, root from poor decisions and, most of all, a lack of growth. Both our governments have been more interested in fighting with each other about the Constitution, causing rammies, than growing our economy. We can't fund public services because there is no growth. We can't clean up our streets because there's no growth. And we can't deliver opportunity for the next generation because there is no growth. And that's why Keir has made our primary mission of the next Labour government to grow the economy. The late, great Alistair Darling, who we missed terribly after he died, understood that very well as the last Labour Chancellor. Scotland was an engine of growth before we helped build this nation in the modern world, and we can do so again. Under Labour, every family in Scotland will benefit from that growth. That truly is the change that Scotland needs, Conference. I've spoken before about our plans for the Scotland Office. For too many years, Scotland's government has focused only on selling Scotland to Scots or selling off Scotland's assets to the world. A Scotland Office seeing Scotland as something that had to be managed. A Labour government will change that. I want the Scotland Office to be Scotland's voice in Whitehall. I want the Scotland Office to be the delivery arm of the UK Labour government in Scotland. I want the Scotland Office to be Scotland's window to the world and sell Scotland to the world. Brand Scotland's an integral part of our plan to grow Scotland's economy. Wherever you go in the world, there's positive recognition for our culture, products, services, from whisky, medicine and smoked salmon to computer game development, higher education and financial services. I was told to take Heart of Midlothian Football Club out of that list. And on a visit to the Western Isles with our tremendous Labour candidate, Torquil Crichton. And it's a wonderful place to visit, because I saw salmon going to North America, Harris Tweed off to Asia and European markets. As Scottish Secretary, I want to lead a Scottish trade mission to every continent in the first 2 years. Maybe I might leave Antarctica for the next term. But Brand Scotland's vital to our economic growth, and we will see the foreign trade and Scottish secretaries for the first time working together in every part of the globe to champion that Brand Scotland. We need that growth, because that's the change that Scotland needs. That and so much more can be achieved by electing our wonderful Scottish Labour candidates to become MPs and deliver for their communities at the heart of the next Labour government. Here in Glasgow, the birthplace of the modern Labour movement, we can turn the city red. In Edinburgh, we can deliver Labour MPs again. In every community from Largs to Leith, we can elect Labour MPs who will stand up for you and your family. Conference, think of how you felt this Friday morning, waking up to the news of 2 more seismic Labour by-election victories in Kingswood and Wellingborough. And imagine, just imagine for 1 second what that feeling would be like waking up the morning after the general election to see a Labour government. Keir walking up Downing Street as Sunak packs his bags. And how good will it feel for Scotland to lead the way in getting rid of this Tory government? So, Mr. Sunak, if you're watching, and I doubt it, call the election and put yourself and the country out of this Tory misery and call it now. Conference, the entirety of the Labour movement and others should join us to send not just a message to Westminster, that achieves nothing, but a government. Because as my political hero John Smith famously said, all we ask is the opportunity to serve. That's the change Scotland needs. Conference, let's deliver it together.